Hi, I'm Lynne Schone, and I hope this testimony will bless you. On December 18th, 2013, we were texted by Heather, our daughter-in-law, that our 40-year-old son had had a stroke. He was in the neuro ICU in stable condition. He had wanted us to continue with our trip, which we had planned, and even though it was in 2 days, because he felt that he was doing well. The doctors kept him in the ICU because they needed to keep his Coumadin levels okay. We got more information in the 2 days and learned that Lance had gone to a chiropractor after he had had a stiff neck that he couldn't seem to get rid of. After the adjustment while driving home, he began to feel like he was getting the flu. He called Heather, his wife, and she told him to stay put and she would pick him up. She demanded, against his wishes, that they go to the ER. That decision was a pure miracle in our minds. They checked in but failed to tell the staff about the adjustment. While they were waiting, Heather called her soon-to-be sister-in-law, who was a ER nurse but was off work that day. And upon finding out that Lance had been to a chiropractor, she told Heather to immediately tell the nurse, and said, "Never mind, I'll call the charge nurse myself." And within seconds, Lance was wheeled into the ER, sent for a CT scan, and surrounded by doctors who just didn't tell him anything. Finally, one of Lance's and Heather's friends, a neurosurgeon, came in as he was making his rounds and heard Lance's name. He showed them the CT scan, where 3 white spots on the frontal lobe were visible. He explained that Lance had had a stroke and that time was of the essence. Lance had already been sent up to the neuro ICU for a constant monitoring of his Coumadin. He remained in the ICU through the new year. Finally, he got home on January 3rd. He had been put on limited work until he felt well enough to go back to work. He did that on January 28th, 2014, a day that will forever affect all of our family. On that snowy day in January, Heather got home with the groceries, and the sitter suggested that she put them away in peace, while the sitter took the 4 children across the street to do some sledding. None of the driveways were the least bit steep, but that day it didn't matter. No one is totally sure of the sequence of events in that split second that Benston, age 6, jumped on his sled and went down the hill. Recently, Benston wrote about the incident, recalling that he heard his sister, Liliana, age 10, yell to him to stop. The sound jolted everyone. Izzy, age 12, got on her phone and called 911. Then her grandparents, so that they would come and stay with them, and posted to everyone in her call list to please pray for Benston. Then she went to the house to get her mom. By that time, the miracles had already begun. First, the woman who was driving the car was an anesthesiologist. She got out and saw the B-man wasn't breathing. She adjusted him and got him breathing again. The impact of Benston's head had removed the front bumper of her car, which was a Mercedes. The sirens could be heard by that time, and as the firemen passed, the EMT truck, which had just been picked up from being serviced, the driver, who happened to be the only pediatric trauma-certified EMT in the station, decided to follow the truck. Nightingale was landing in the nearby school as Lance pulled into his driveway from his first day at work. The EMT kept Benston breathing. They put him on the helicopter and carried him to the hospital, the same one Lance had been released from just 3 weeks earlier. So many acts of our loving God to save our precious little boy. Once Heather's brothers heard the news, the around-the-clock vigil began. One brother dealt with Lance's HR department, which immediately said, I guess he came back to work way too soon. We will put him on 3 months of disability." What a blessing that was. In the next 3 months, Lance only left Benston's side to see the girls and to take showers. 2 other brothers took over the reporting of Benston's condition to a blog. Day after day, with daylight and darkness cycling, prayers were being sent in a fog of fear and grief. After a plug was inserted into Benston's brain to monitor the pressure, the narcotics were increased. They finally had to give him a drug that they said was 70 times more addictive than heroin. At long last, on February 7th, the pressure began to subside and the weaning process began. Random movements, disorientation, and other symptoms of addiction withdrawal plagued his little body. One of Heather's brothers, Tyler, set up camp in the small waiting room. We went up February 8th to try to see Benston. Lance had us pick up the girls, and he had dinner with us. During that dinner, he explained how the first night, around 3 a.m., he asked God for a sign. Lance said he had apologized to God for asking, but really wanted to know God's hand was there. He then saw a vision of his dead grandparents and his sister, Amanda, who had become a severely, profoundly retarded epileptic at 4 months and had died at age 23. After seeing that vision, he fell asleep, and in the morning he was awakened by a knock on the door. It opened, and a new nurse told Lance that she'd be working with Benston, and her name was Amanda. Lance said he couldn't believe it. Then a doctor came in who told him she was on loan from Walter Reed and keeping up her pediatric certification in neurology. She would be there for a while to help with Benston and to monitor Lance's Coumadin levels several times a day. The day they began taking Benston off the drugs to lower his cranial pressure, she came to Lance. She said her work there was completed and she was needed back at Walter Reed. Lance told us that all the time she was taking care of him, she never saw her name. This last time he looked up at her name tag. It read, Dr. God. As she left, she told Lance that everything would be all right. During the following months, we held on to that encounter. Back to January 28th, when as soon as we learned the news, just as we did when we heard of Lance's stroke, we sent out messages to everyone we knew to please pray for complete healing. I'm on an international prayer chain which sent out the word. The LUMC community was praying. Our friends in Belgium, Texas, West Virginia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maine, California, Florida, and places we didn't realize took our requests to their churches. The local McLean community held a prayer vigil on February 1st. They organized a walk to bring awareness. Red ribbons with hashtag Pray for B-Man appeared on trees and houses. The school put it up in their sign. The Capitol hockey team got out the word on a fan's website. The team recorded messages of encouragement, came to visit, even when they couldn't see him. They brought him a signed jersey, a winning hockey stick and puck. They even came when he felt better to play a game with him. Their involvement meant so much because B-Man was a huge fan. Improvement seemed so fast at first compared to the doctor's predictions. After being weaned off of the narcotic for cranial pressure, beginning February 7th, he left the hospital for rehab on February 12th. The rehab doctors had predicted he would spend 3 or 4 months there. They said they would reassess after 2 months. Lance was concerned that his disability would run out. On March 12th, Liliana's birthday, Benston came home. Benston had to learn in rehab to sit up, hold a spoon, feed himself, walk, and to speak with force enough to be heard. He still could not remember things, and he asked questions repeatedly. He could not spend much time upright before he needed to nap. He was in therapy every day and sometimes more than once a day. Speech, physical, occupational, educational, and neurological therapies filled each day. Lance went back to work mid-April. His schedule had been drastically cut back by his company so that he could leave if he needed. The emotional and mental strain really showed. His company, CGI, had been wonderful about listening to his needs and giving him more duties as he felt capable. He now has little effect from the stroke, and he's almost back to pre-stroke energy. He knows that had it not been for the stroke, he would not have been able to spend the time with Benston. So although it didn't look like a blessing at the time, it was. December 7th marked 7 years from the stroke, and this month it will be 7 years from Benston's accident. Just looking at the 12-year-old today, one would probably not see anything abnormal. At 9, he no longer needed a personal aide, and he was released to play on the playground, and also with other children, which he had been banned from doing because of worried about a head trauma. He plays Little League Baseball. For 4 years, he continued to receive educational, physical, and neurological therapies, as well as an eye therapy, which works with eye-brain transmitters. A year ago, he was down to occupational therapy. He's back to normal weight and looks like any other healthy 12-year-old boy. He remembers everything before the accident, and until 3 years ago, nothing of the accident. That's when he began to remember. He only feels very grateful that he's been able to come back as much as he has. He's gotten back his sweet nature, which has always set him apart. This is his 3rd year at a very special school, the Lab School, which specializes in children with learning disabilities. The teachers and therapists have amplified his progress, and we feel that God's hand has been in everything. Last year, Lance said, "I finally have my son back." I don't know why our prayers were answered the way we wanted them to be when prayers for Amanda's healing didn't seem to be. But God's been working good throughout, and in ways we might not see at the time, but in looking back, they were made clear. God has blessed us all through this story. He's always good and is there when we turn to Him. We thank you all for your prayers throughout the years. We know what a difference they've made. This video is a glimpse of the journey. To see more, Google Benston Schone on YouTube. That's BenstenSchone. And thank you.